Hi and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. All right, so I have a confession to make. I love sauerkraut. I grew up eating sauerkraut on hot dogs and I obtained that taste and I have loved it all my life. And so today we're going to make sauerkraut from scratch at home, and it's easy and fun to do. So we'll get started when we get back in just a moment. So all we have to have is a head of cabbage and some salt, and we are ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut this head of cabbage in half, and then I'm going to take off some of these larger leaves because I'm going to want those for a specific purpose a little bit later. And then I'm just going to shred this cabbage. Now I have a mandolin shredder, and I've tried it with cutting cabbage like this, and I don't like it as well as just doing it by hand. So it's going to take me a few minutes, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut the cabbage a little bit thin. If you've ever opened up a can of sauerkraut, you know pretty much about how thin these strips of cabbage need to be. So that's what I'm going to do with the whole head of cabbage. And when I get done with this, we'll be back. I have half of the head shredded like this, and then I cut it the other way so that the pieces are not so long. And now I'm just going to put it up in my scale because I want to weigh it. And that is about 300 grams, which is exactly about what this half was. So I have about 600 grams right here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to process this head of cabbage half at a time. So I'm going to next add the salt. Now I use about a 2% salt to the cabbage. So if the cabbage weighs 600 grams, 2% of that is going to be 12 grams of salt. So I am going to take this little dish, and I have coarse sea salt is what I'm using. Different people use different kinds of salt. I just use what I have in my cabinet. So I'm going to put in 12 grams of that salt, and that's it. And then I'm going to sprinkle that all over the cabbage. The salt is now being mixed in with the cabbage, and what I want to do now, this is going to take me, and my hands are very clean, this bowl is very clean, so I'm going to rub that salt into this cabbage. I'm trying to sort of even bruise the cabbage. I just want to smash it down and pinch it together, squish it together, do whatever I need to do to get that salt rubbed into the cabbage shreds. Now, this will speed up the fermentation of the cabbage because sauerkraut is a fermentation, and we want the good bacteria to grow. And the salt will help that. One of the things that the salt does, and I'm beginning to feel it already, is that the salt, through the scientific process of osmosis, draws water from the cabbage outside. The water is contained inside the cells of the cabbage, and what the salt does is that it draws the water through the cell walls and brings it to the outside of the cabbage. And so this mixture is getting wetter and wetter, and which is what we want. And it will draw out enough liquid to hopefully submerge the cabbage in its own salty brine. And so this is going to take probably about 10 minutes for me to work this salt in. And so we'll come back when we're ready for the next step. I have finished with the first half of the head, and I have put it in the jar. This is a 2-quart wide mouth jar. It's busy in there making its own liquid. I don't know if you can see the liquid in the bottom there, but there's a line across there, and the liquid will gradually fill up to the top. In just a few minutes we'll get in there and really scrunch it down. But I'm going to now start the second head, so I'm just going to put both of these right now into the scale, and they are 700 grams, so that means I'm going to be putting 14 grams of salt in with this. So I'm going to shred these two, get that all mixed up in my bowl right here, and get the salt worked in. And there's still some liquid in the bottom of this bowl from the first batch. And when we get ready to put the last of the batch into the jar, we'll bring you back. We're ready for the next step. This other half is all done. And if you can see now, the liquid here is up to right here. So it is producing more liquid, and that's exactly what we want. So we want to get all of the rest of this in the jar, and this is also producing liquid. We'll see when we get to the bottom. And we're ready now to get started on the fermenting process. Now what we ideally want is to just mash this cabbage down as far as we can into this jar. Now, those of you that do fermenting know that there are all kinds of specialized equipment that you can use. They have special fermenting jars and food weights that you put on top of the food so it doesn't come up above the liquid. Well, if you know me, you know I don't buy that kind of stuff. I just figure stuff out from what I have at home. Okay, so look at the liquid that has been produced here in this bowl. So we're going to pour that right in. And then I want to get all these little cabbage pieces in. It's going to make wonderful sauerkraut. Okay, so I went to my tool drawer to see what I might use to mash this cabbage down. And so a wooden spoon will work just fine. But look what I found. This is my ice pick right there. So when it's in this little holder, look at that nice flat edge. I can just use that to push that cabbage right down. Is that just cool or what? Now, look what is happening to the liquid. I'm getting liquid now clear up to the top when I'm smashing that down. And that is exactly what we want. We want this cabbage to be immersed in its own liquid. Woohoo! And I have not added any extra liquid. Okay, so that's all smashed flat and it's now covered in its own liquid. So the next step is to take one of these larger cabbage leaves and to just put right over the top as kind of a little barrier. And then we need a weight. So here's a little trick. Now sometimes I don't get liquid all the way to the top like that. I have to wait for a day or two for that liquid to come all the way and submerge the cabbage. But what if it doesn't? Well, it has to be covered in liquid by about day 2, or you run into problems with mold and other things. So this is a little trick that I have kind of figured out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this jar full of water as a weight to just put right on the top to hold that down. But the water that I fill with, in case I need to add more liquid because it didn't come all the way up to the top, I'm going to make this a 2% liquid, so that if I need more liquid, I can just use the water from here and pour right in there and it'll be the same. So I'm going to turn my scale on, zero it out to this little half pint, which is the same as a cup, and then I'm going to fill it with water and weigh how much that water is. And that water is 211 grams. And so 2% is going to be about 5 grams of salt. So Is that right? Yeah, about 5. So I'm going to put just shy of 5 grams right in here. Oh, wait, have to zero it out. Five grams of salt. And so this is now a 2% salt solution, which I can use if needed to fill up the liquid in there. So I'm going to put this smaller jar right on the top here to weigh it down to serve as a weight. And we can see that the liquid is now up above, and that's just about right. Now, we know that gas is going to be produced as this cabbage ferments. And there is enough, this is kind of a tight fit, but there's room enough for gas to escape. Very little room for other microorganisms to get down inside and cause any kinds of bad growth, but we're going to watch it closely. So we'll keep our eye on this for the next couple of days, and I'll bring you back periodically. The thing that we're going to do is we're going to ferment this for as long as we want. There's no set time. I'll start checking it by tasting it after about 2 weeks. Usually it's way too mild for me by 2 weeks. I usually like it best at about 6 weeks. And once when I forgot it and it went 10 weeks, it was even better. So we'll see what we get with this. So this is our setup with just things that we had on hand, and we have lovely cabbage. Now pay attention to the color right now. It's a nice spring fresh green. By the time that it gets done, it will be more yellowish, brownish, and it will be much more translucent. So those are the qualities that we'll be looking for. So we'll come back periodically and we'll see you at our next checkup. We're back. This is 1 week into our sauerkraut growing, and this is what it looks like. Notice the color has changed. No more is it that spring green. Also notice that we're getting really good fermentation with evidence of these gas bubbles. Now, one of the things that has happened on this one, and I'm really glad it did because this will be very instructional, is that you may notice we've got some mold growing in those gas bubbles. And so what we need to do is to get in there. This batch of sauerkraut has produced more liquid than anyone I've ever done before. So there's plenty of liquid up above. And so that has produced a lot of this scum from the gas production. I put just a little lid over the top to protect it from getting dusty. And our jar, our weight jar with just the 2% saline is in there. So I'm going to use this heavy magnet to lift it out. And then we're just going to get in with this spoon, and we are going to spoon out all of that mold. And that mold does not hurt a thing. But while we're at it, we're going to get rid of some of the other bubbles so it won't happen again. And the side that was growing the mold was faced away from me. I would check it every day when I walked by on the front side and didn't check the back side. So that's where it was growing. So that's good enough for now, and I'm going to continue checking. So I'm going to put our weighted bottle right back in to hold everything down and put that lid just loose on the top. I will start tasting this at week 2, which is exactly a week from today. And then I'll taste it about every week until it gets to the taste that I really like, which will probably be about 6 weeks. So we'll be back next week. This is week 2 of our sauerkraut fermentation. So I'm going to test it. I test it every week with a taste test, well, starting about week 2. So I'm going to pull this little jar out that's been weighting things down. And I'm going to go deep to see what I can taste. I don't expect it will be done today, but you never know. Oh my goodness. It's done. It's done to just exactly how I like it. I've never had it finish this fast before. I noticed several days ago that it had stopped making bubbles, but I just assumed that it was continuing to ferment. And oh, it's really, really good. So let's go ahead and I'm taking it out of this jar. This jar, you may remember, grew some mold last week, and I made sure that no more mold grew all during this past week. So let's get it out and ready. So I discard the top, and I do that because I had a little mold on the top, and sometimes that taste gets on the top, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take out most of what's right here on the top. Okay, I'm going to drain the juice. And then I'm going to change the jar. I just got jars ready just in case, having no idea that this was going to be the day. So I'm going to fill this clean jar with this lovely sauerkraut. And if you can make enough and can this, but I don't ever can it because it kind of ruins the taste of the fresh sauerkraut, and still it keeps for a long, long time in any case. So this was packed pretty tight, and I've loosened it up some. So I'm just going to taste a little bit now that was on the bottom. This is really, really good. So I do not put the juice back in it, and I just put a lid on it just like this and put it in the refrigerator. Now it still has some liquid down at the bottom, so it's going to stay very moist. But this is now ready to eat, and we will enjoy this. So sauerkraut could not be easier, and I hope that you try it sometime. And the trick with sauerkraut is that you never know how long it's going to take to ferment all the way. So be sure that you do a taste test every single week. Usually I don't like it until about week 6, but this is really yummy. So hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.